She yelled in front of everyone, "You'll never be a good husband." I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I just got up, paid the bill, and left. Hours later, a message revealed the secret she'd been hiding for months. When she humiliated me in public, I thought I had lost everything. In truth, I just didn't yet know what she was hiding. I'm 32 years old. Until recently, I believed my life was exactly what most people would call normal. Nothing spectacular, nothing chaotic. Just stable. I had been married to Laura for 6 years. In total, we were together for almost 10. We met in college. I was the quieter, more organized guy, focused on passing my classes and working at the same time. She was always the opposite, extroverted, charismatic, full of ambition. In the beginning, it seemed to complement us. We grew together. When I got my first permanent job in logistics operations, she was still doing an internship at an architecture firm. I paid more of the bills back then. I never threw that in her face. I never made a point of who earns more. When she started to advance in her career, I was the first to celebrate. I endured difficult phases, sleepless nights, stress, insecurities. I always thought that's what marriage was, partnership. We lived in a financed apartment, nothing luxurious, but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, a parking space. Little by little, we bought everything. Sofa, table, appliances. All paid for with hard work. I was never into parties. I always preferred staying home, cooking, watching something together. Laura liked going out more, events, networking. I went with her when I could. When I couldn't, she went alone. I never thought that was strange. Until I started to. In the months before everything blew up, Laura was different. More impatient. Less present. She fought over small things. If I asked how her day was, she gave short answers. If I tried to start a conversation, she seemed bored. I thought it was work stress. She started coming home late frequently. She said it was meetings, projects, tight deadlines. I believed her. I never asked for proof. I never checked her phone. I never wanted to be that kind of husband. Today, I see that my trust became her convenience. The night that destroyed everything was her boss's birthday. A dinner at an expensive restaurant, the kind that seems sophisticated but only serves to inflate the egos of people who want to feel important. I didn't want to go. I'd had a heavy week. I was tired, physically and mentally. I said I'd rather stay home. She insisted. "It'll look bad if I show up alone," she said. "Everyone is bringing their partner." I agreed. On the way there, I noticed she was on her phone the whole time, smiling at the screen. When I asked what it was, she replied, "Work." At the restaurant, there were about 20 people. Mostly her co-workers. I knew some from other occasions. We sat near the middle of the table. Right from the start, I noticed one specific guy, Daniel. I had heard that name before. A new co-worker at her office. Recently divorced, according to her. Always very confident. Spoke loudly. Expensive clothes. The kind of person who needs to be noticed. Laura seemed especially animated around him. She laughed at his jokes. Touched his arm when she talked. She interrupted me when I spoke, but didn't interrupt him. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to seem paranoid. The wine started flowing early. Laura drank fast. Much faster than usual. By the 3rd glass, she was already different. More loose. More aggressive too. At some point, the conversation turned to marriage. A recently engaged colleague was talking about plans, the wedding, the future. He looked at me and Laura and said, "And you too? You've been together so long." I smiled politely. "Yeah, almost 10 years together." Some people smiled, raised their glasses. That's when Laura laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a short, ironic laugh. Almost contemptuous. Too long, she said. And with the wrong person, at that. The silence was immediate. I thought I had misheard. I looked at her, expecting her to finish it with a joke. She stared right at me. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't have gotten married, she said, loudly, clearly, for everyone to hear. I settled. My whole body froze. Someone tried to laugh, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. She continued. He's comfortable. But he was never enough for me. I felt the blood rush to my face. Not from anger. From humiliation. Some people looked away. Others sat motionless. Daniel watched everything in silence. I said quietly, "Laura, stop." She replied, "Someone needs to be honest here." I stood up. "Let's go." She replied without hesitation. No. That was the final point. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I put money on the table, grabbed my jacket, and left. Behind me, I heard murmurs. Questions. But I didn't look back. In the car, I drove aimlessly for almost an hour. No music. No phone. Just trying to understand how I had gotten there. When I got home, I sat on the sofa in the dark. I didn't cry. I kept trying to fit that scene with the last 10 years of my life. About half an hour later, my phone vibrated. It was a message from a number I barely recognized. "You left early. You need to know what happened after." It was a female colleague of hers from the office. My stomach sank. Update 1. I stared at the message for nearly a full minute before replying. Part of me already knew nothing good would come from it, but ignoring it wouldn't change what had already happened. I simply replied, "What?" The response came almost instantly. "Can I call you?" Before I could even confirm, the phone started ringing. Her voice sounded tense, as if she were afraid of making the call itself. "I'm sorry for calling this late," she began. "But I thought it was wrong for you to leave without knowing." "Knowing what?" I asked, already feeling a knot in my stomach. She took a deep breath. "Right after you left, Laura started crying. She said she'd had too much to drink, that she hadn't meant to say those things that way." I stayed silent. "But that didn't last long," she continued. "Daniel went after her. They talked in a corner, right near the exit." "Talked how?" I asked, even though I already suspected. "Not like co-workers," she replied. "They were very close." He put his hand on her back. She leaned into him. My heart beat faster. After that, she went on, they left together. Holding hands. I closed my eyes. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Positive." The call was silent for a few seconds. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't know anything before. If I had, I would have told you." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long time. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The night she came home far too late to be normal. The messages she'd delete. Her phone always face down. The arguments over nothing. The coldness. I got up, went to the kitchen, made a coffee I couldn't even drink. I opened the laptop. I logged into our joint bank account. The one we created to make life easier. Rent, bills, groceries. All in there. At first, it seemed normal. Then I started noticing strange charges. Expensive restaurants on specific nights. A hotel near our home. Parking charges in neighborhoods I'd never been to. I wrote down the dates. Each date coincided with some excuse she had given. Late meeting. Office event. Business trip. These weren't just one or two charges. There were many. I took screenshots of everything. Around 3 a.m., I heard the apartment door open. Laura came in slowly, as if trying not to make a sound. When she saw me sitting at the table with the laptop open, she froze. "You're still up?" she asked. "I was waiting for you," I replied. She dropped her purse on the counter. "We need to talk." "I agree," I said. "Start by explaining this." I turned the laptop toward her. Her face changed instantly. The color drained from it. She stayed silent for several seconds, staring at the screen. "How long?" I asked. "It's not what you think," she started. "How long?" I repeated, without raising my voice. She closed her eyes. 3 months. 3 months. 3 months sharing a bed with me. 3 months lying every single day. 3 months using our money. With Daniel? I asked. She nodded. And tonight? I continued. Was that planned? She hesitated. I thought it would be easier if everything just ended at once. That hurt more than the betrayal. So you humiliated me in public to ease your own guilt? She started to cry. I was unhappy, she said. Our marriage became routine. You got comfortable. Routine doesn't justify an affair, I replied. And it certainly doesn't justify using our money for it. She tried to step closer. It was a mistake. It was dozens of choices, I said. Every day, for 3 months. Silence filled the kitchen. You're leaving, I said. Tomorrow. She looked at me as if I had hit her. Are you serious? The apartment is in my name. You moved in later. You can check the paperwork. You're not even going to try to save our marriage? She asked. I tried for years. You ended it all at the restaurant. She went to the bedroom crying and started packing a suitcase. I stayed there, sitting, feeling strange, but calm. The next morning, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Daniel. A long, overly polite text, full of words like mistake, respect, and it wasn't the intention. I didn't even reply. I blocked him. But the story was still far from over. Update 2. Laura left the apartment in the late afternoon with 2 suitcases and a swollen face. There was no farewell. No apology that felt real. Just fragmented sentences, spoken more to ease her own conscience than to actually speak to me. I never meant to hurt you. I was just confused. We can talk when I'm calmer. I didn't respond. I closed the door and leaned against it for a few seconds. The apartment was too quiet, but it wasn't a bad quiet. It was a clean quiet. For the first time in months, I could breathe without that constant weight on my chest. I spent the next days handling everything with cold, practical efficiency. I canceled her additional credit card. Changed passwords. Organized documents. Took photos of everything in the apartment, just for safety. I didn't want any more surprises. She tried to make contact. First by text, saying she needed to pick up just a few more things. Then by email, asking to talk calmly. Then through her mother, who called saying her daughter was in a very bad place and that I should be understanding, because everyone makes mistakes. I didn't respond to any of these attempts. A week later, I got another call. It was the same colleague from her office who had warned me that night. Are you okay? She asked. As okay as possible, I replied. She hesitated before saying the rest. I shouldn't meddle, but you deserve to know how things really are. That's when the story took on a whole new level. Daniel was not single. He never had been. He had a steady girlfriend at the office. A stable relationship, known by several people. Laura wasn't the new love. She was the hidden affair. The girlfriend found out, my colleague said. She saw messages on his phone. I swallowed hard. What happened? He said he never promised her anything. That she knew what she was getting into. That he didn't want any drama. I closed my eyes. He basically said she was just a fling, she finished. After hanging up, I stood still for several minutes, trying to process it. She betrayed me thinking she was trading a stable marriage for something better. In the end, she found out she was just a detour in someone else's life, someone who never took her seriously. 2 days later, Laura tried to call me 16 times in a row. I blocked her. The next day, she showed up at my building. The doorman called asking if he should let her up. No, I responded. Do not authorize it. She sat in the lobby for nearly an hour. I saw her on the building's security feed. I didn't feel the urge to go down. I didn't feel pity. Soon after, more news came. She had been fired. Apparently, the last few months had been a disaster at work. Frequent lateness, mistakes on important projects, arguments with superiors. The dinner at the restaurant wasn't an isolated incident, it was just the tipping point. She lost everything in quick succession. Her husband. Her lover. Her job. And slowly, her friends too. Some people tried to support her at first, but the fatigue came quickly. No one likes constant drama, late-night messages, endless crying without taking responsibility. 2 weeks after the separation, I received one last message from her, sent from a different number. I ruined everything. You were the only person who ever truly loved me. I only realized it after I lost you. I read it once. Deleted it. Because love doesn't humiliate you in public. Love doesn't lie for months. Love doesn't use you as a safety net. Today, just over 3 weeks later, my life isn't perfect. But it is honest. The apartment feels different. I rearranged the furniture. Took down old photos. Threw out things that no longer made sense. I started working out in the mornings again. I started sleeping well again. I'm not dating. I'm not bitter. I'm clear-headed. Sometimes I think about that night at the restaurant. Her laugh. The sentence spoken aloud for everyone to hear. In that moment, I thought it was the worst day of my life. Today, I know it was the day I got my dignity back. If she hadn't spoken. If she hadn't laughed. If she hadn't exposed me. I might still be there, trying to be enough for someone who never respected me. Sometimes, public humiliation isn't the end. It's the push you needed. Update 3. I thought it was over. Honestly, I thought after losing everything, Laura would at least have the dignity to accept the consequences. I underestimated the desperation. 3 days after her last message, a mutual friend, Raphael, called me. Man, I didn't want to get involved, he began, but I think you should know. Know what? I asked. She showed up at my place last night. Crying. Said you were the one mistake she couldn't afford to make. I let out a short, humorless laugh. And what did you say? That I wasn't getting involved, he replied. That what she did was indefensible. According to him, Laura talked for almost 2 hours. She cried, contradicted herself, blamed work, stress, routine, anything that wasn't herself. She said Daniel wasn't who she thought he was. That she had been manipulated. That she felt empty. But what caught my attention most was a specific phrase Raphael repeated. She said she thought you'd always be there. That phrase echoed in my head. She didn't betray me because she was unhappy. She betrayed me because she felt too safe to respect me. In the following days, I started noticing something curious. Friends who had once been closer to her began to naturally drift away. Not out of loyalty to me, but because no one likes being around someone who implodes their own life and still tries to play the victim. Laura started posting strange things on social media. Vague quotes. Obvious subtweets. Messages about making mistakes while trying to be happy, and no one understands what goes on in a woman's heart. I had already blocked her everywhere. But the news kept coming through third parties. She had moved back in with her parents. Into her old room. The same room from her teenage years. According to someone who mentioned it, she spent days without leaving the house, sleeping late, avoiding conversation. Her father was furious. Her mother tried to protect her, but was tired. Daniel, on the other hand, went on with his life as if nothing had happened. Stayed with his official girlfriend. Laura tried to find him one last time. He threatened to call the police if she didn't stop. That's when it finally hit her. She hadn't been special. She never was. She was disposable. 2 weeks after that, I received a letter. An actual physical letter, left at the building's front desk. I didn't open it right away. I stared at that envelope for a few minutes. The handwriting was hers. I recognized it instantly. I ended up opening it at the end of the day. It was long. Confused. Full of apologies that felt more like a fear of being alone than real remorse. In one part, she wrote, "I destroyed the best thing I ever had for something that wasn't even real." I folded the letter. Put it in a drawer. Didn't respond. Because some conversations only exist to try and ease the guilt of the person who did wrong, not to repair the damage. Meanwhile, my life was truly beginning to reorganize. I started going out again with friends I hadn't seen often. Started accepting invitations. Started making small plans, short trips, different weekends, simple things. I realized how much I had molded myself to fit into her world. And how much it had cost me. One night, sitting alone on the sofa, I caught myself thinking about something I had never stopped to reflect on. I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of who I thought she was. And that made all the difference. Update 4. After the dust began to settle, something strange happened. I started remembering things I had ignored for years. Small moments. Small phrases. Small signs. I remembered the times Laura made subtle comments, almost invisible, that now made perfect sense. "You're not very ambitious, are you? Sometimes I feel like I'm growing alone. You settle for things too easily." Back then, I interpreted that as encouragement. Today, I see it was contempt disguised as advice. I've always been the type of person who believes stability is a virtue. That consistency matters. That you don't always need to be climbing to be living well. Laura wanted more. Always more. More status, more validation, more excitement. And instead of admitting that honestly, she chose to turn me into the silent villain of her own frustration. One night, I found an old notebook of hers inside a forgotten box in the closet. It wasn't exactly a diary, but it had scattered notes, ideas, drafts. I almost threw it away without looking. But I ended up opening it. On one of the pages, written months before the affair, was a sentence that chilled me. "I'm afraid of waking up 10 years from now and realizing I chose the wrong life." It didn't say the wrong person. It said the wrong life. I closed the notebook. In that moment, I understood that nothing I could have done would have been enough. Because the problem was never me. I just represented the stability she had come to hate. Meanwhile, I was changing. I started waking up earlier. Not out of forced discipline, but because sleep came more lightly. I started running again, something I hadn't done since before the marriage. My body ached, but my mind felt clear. I started cooking better. Not to please anyone, but because it gave me pleasure. I started taking care of the apartment as if it were truly my space, not a shared set. People started noticing. A colleague from work commented, "You seem more at peace lately." And it was true. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to measure my words inside my own home. I didn't have to prove my worth. I didn't have to compete with any invisible rivals. A few weeks later, I ran into Daniel by chance. It was in a supermarket parking lot. He was leaving, I was arriving. Our eyes met for a second longer than normal. He looked away first. I didn't feel anger. Or the urge to confront him. just indifference. And that, I realized, was victory. I later heard his official relationship didn't last long either. Nothing confirmed, just bits of gossip. But I didn't care. What mattered to me was something simple: I had come out whole. Laura tried to contact me once more, months later. A short email. No drama. Just saying she was in therapy, trying to rebuild herself, and that she understood if I never replied. I didn't reply. Not out of hatred. But because some stories need to end without an epilogue. Today, looking back, I realize how much that public humiliation changed everything. Not because it was cruel, but because it was clear. It ripped off the mask. It showed who she was when she thought she had power. When she thought I wouldn't leave. And that saved me. If that night hadn't happened, maybe I'd still be there, trying to improve for someone who had already decided to leave in silence. Sometimes, the most humiliating moment of your life is just the exact point where you finally break free. Final update. It's been almost a year since that night at the restaurant. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times, it feels like it happened to someone else. And in a way, it did. I am no longer the man sitting at that table, smiling without understanding why he was being publicly ridiculed. Back then, I thought strength was enduring. That maturity was yielding. That love meant staying, even when it hurt. Today, I know better. Strength is walking away when respect ends. Maturity is accepting the truth, even when it shatters your plans. And love never asks you to shrink yourself to fit in. After the separation, I went through a quiet phase. Not exactly sad, but introspective. I started writing more. Not to post, not to show anyone, just to organize my thoughts. I wrote about who I was at the start of the marriage. About who I tried to become to please her. About how many times I swallowed discomfort, thinking that was commitment. I realized something uncomfortable: I had ignored signs out of emotional convenience. Not the signs of the affair, but the signs of disrespect. They were always there. The way she spoke about other people as if she were above them. The veiled contempt for simple routines. The constant need for external validation. None of this came out of nowhere. I just chose not to see it. I don't blame myself for it anymore. Everyone learns in their own time. But I recognize my part: I confused peace with an absence of conflict. Months later, I started seeing someone new. Nothing serious at first. Just honest conversations. No games. No comparisons. And something stood out to me right away: I felt no anxiety. I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to fight for attention. I didn't have to walk on eggshells. That's when I realized just how draining my previous relationship had been and how much I had normalized it. Laura, from what I've heard, is still trying to rebuild her life. I've heard she moved to another city. Switched careers. Tries to live more quietly. I wish her well. But far away from me. Because forgiving doesn't mean reopening doors. And moving on doesn't mean forgetting, it means learning. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that character isn't revealed when things are easy. It shows itself when someone believes there will be no consequences. That night at the restaurant, Laura thought she was in control. Thought she could laugh. Thought she could belittle me without cost. She was wrong. That was the exact moment I stopped trying to be enough for someone who never respected me. Today, my life is simple. But it's mine. I have routines that bring me peace. People who respect me. Silences that don't hurt. Laughter that doesn't hide contempt. And above all, I have something I lost for a long time while trying to maintain a marriage that was already dead. Dignity. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, here's what I wish someone had told me before. You don't need to be humiliated to prove your love. You don't need to compete with someone else's fantasies. You don't lose when someone betrays you, you free yourself. Sometimes, the person who breaks you in public is just giving you the chance to rebuild yourself in private. And when you do it right, there's no room left for regrets.
Reddit Relics comment. You know what hit me hardest in this story? It wasn't the betrayal. It was the contempt. Laughing at someone in public after years of partnership isn't honesty, it's cruelty. And ironically, the person she called insufficient was the only real adult at that table. He didn't yell, didn't explode, didn't lower himself. He just left. And that says a lot. In the end, she confused stability with weakness and respect with a lifetime guarantee. She learned the hardest way that dignity doesn't make a sound, but it's the only thing still standing when everything else crumbles.